What drove you to start a podcast specifically about reinsurance? I'm a big fan of the podcast. I especially love the analogy battles.
Oh, that's very kind of them to say. This mysterious Gary from
Chicago.
somewhere, Chicago.
So Gary from Chicago, as a quick aside, Meta had this sort of all hands about like how the conditions are changing rapidly, and TikTok's taking their lunch. They have no real vision to catching up with TikTok, and it's this whole doom and gloom all hands. Q&A starts. Gary from Chicago. Are we still getting like meta days, which are like extra days off? To which Mark Zuckerberg looks and he's like, I can assume you could tell from the tone of this conversation, but meta days are canceled. And then all these tweets are like, R.I.P. Gary.
Oh,
poor Gary from Chicago. He had a good time whilst at Meta.
indeed.
So what drove you to start a podcast specifically about reinsurance? I'm a big fan, especially love analogy battles.
So we have to give massive credit to Cordy, who's our person behind the scenes, for conceptualizing that we could even do a podcast and convincing us that that was a pragmatic and feasible thing for us to do. So hats off to him for that. I think when we talked about doing a podcast and discovered that there was no anything reinsurance related in the whole world of podcasting, we got super excited and we were like, oh, we're going to own that space then, because we love talking about reinsurance. There's loads of people out there who love talking about reinsurance, and we're going to bring them all together and have some amazing conversations about reinsurance, and it will be a happy little space for everybody's earbuds.
Well, I think there's such an interesting, like, the reinsurance people, like, when they go out and they talk work stuff, there's all like, it's such an interesting niche of the world, and when you find people and you meet people who are kind of in a similar space, it's
but nuanced.
Analogy on the fly, but it's similar to, like, you meet a stranger at like work and they're like, oh, I grew up in this city, and you're like, what part of that city? And you're like, well, this area. It's like, what part of that area? Like, well, on that street. It's like, I was on the, like, and it's that, like, I think when you meet people in reinsurance, it's similar. It's like, oh, but what firm and like what team and like what are you? And then you have it's like this immediate bond. And I think what we've tried to set out to do is kind of recreate a little bit of that on this sort of weekly basis. That's sort of a welcome to your safe space reinsurance.
Well, it can be quite lonely, in the market, even in Lloyd's, which is unique among, well, fairly few places I can think of that are comparable, in the sense that you can walk down the street and see lots of other insurance people around. But spotting the reinsurance people even then can be quite hard. It's like 1 in 10 maybe at best who's from a reinsurance world. The rest are doing boring old insurance. We like pretending.
We just lost a listener.
No. Well, reinsurance is cooler. Sorry. Yeah, that's why it's the reinsurance podcast.
If insurance was as cool, there would be the insurance podcast, but come on.
They're shouting back into their headphones now. Reinsurance is just a part of insurance. The best part.
We're the niche. We're the category.
Well,
but that was sort of it. And I think we didn't really have huge, like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have this sort of massive vision to doing, and we're not doing like sponsorship or anything. This is something we're just doing for fun.
I mean, unless you want to pay us money for doing this, then why not? Or send us stuff.
You can
sponsored by the sweet new Reese or Rice clothing range, now available in extra small.
Yeah, exactly. If you want us to plug your swag, we'll send you an address.
What's that you're eating, Jared? It's the new Muck something burger, made entirely. I'm excited for this.
Oh, we're gonna spin this right out.
Yeah, send your proposals to Cordy, and he will be in touch.
But we found that we really enjoy doing them, and it gives us further justification for like keeping up with the news and chatting about stuff. And we've always wanted this to, because of that sort of familial kind of sense of this nature, this is very off the cuff, and we wanted this to kind of feel like all those conversations we've always had in the industry, or you have with new colleagues and things, is an extension of that. So continue to send us things you like and suggestions and things, but we have a lot of fun doing it, so I hope people have a lot of fun listening to it.
And we learn a lot as well. We get to ask, because we claim, like, the standard line, There's a lot of people listening to this podcast who might not know what that is, that word you just said. So could you explain it? I also didn't know what you know.
I learned this moments ago.
So it's great for us in many ways to be able to bring on guests who are experts in their field and to really talk about the ins and outs of a given line of business or an approach to doing analytics or whatever it might be. I don't want to spoil any upcoming episodes, but we've got some really exciting guests in the pipeline who are going to be talking about all those kind of bits of the industry that you wish you understood better and had all sorts of questions for. So we'll do our best to ask them the exciting things on your minds.
Yeah.